Welcome to a new episode of Delphine's Circle, where we uncover the mind, body, and spirit of success. Subscribe now for free to receive updates on the latest interviews. Then sit back, relax, and tune in. Landon, welcome to the Circle.
Yes, thank you. I feel welcome.
Do you feel welcome?
Absolutely. Well, how can I feel like a warm embrace the second I came down here. You're so wonderful at making people feel comfortable.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for that.
That is my goal, absolutely.
You're achieving.
Well, since I met you, which was in December, I have been so excited and looking forward to having you on the show and in the Circle. I know you have a very busy schedule, so I'm so appreciative that you made time for us. We met in December at Carrie Hyden's birthday celebration in Napa, another Delphine Circle guest. And we got whisked straight into this very exclusive VIP tasting room where you so eloquently described the wines and the process and everything. And I was like, oh my God, this is incredible. I've really achieved, VIP status at this point. Is that one of your roles as a CEO, to actually do tastings for people?
We don't do a lot of tastings. Most wineries, people don't know this, but Napa Valley had more visitors in 2019 than Disneyland. So it's a big hospitality space. But for us, we're very private. We do probably less than 10, 12 hospitality visits a year. But when people come, we really want them to feel connected to us and feel extremely special. So this isn't a tasting, you come in for an hour and we walk you through the script. It's energetic, it's narrative, it's emotional. We want you to have a deep connection to the wines. And so myself or Jayson, the winemaker, we try to do most of them because you'll feel that level of connectivity. That's a key part of who we are. And you'll get a little buzz working and you'll feel warm and fuzzy on your way out to the next place. So
it was awesome. I will say that, by far the best ever. I hear that congratulations may be in order, that 100 Acre just got its 42nd 100-point rating.
Yeah, that's quite, it's a little bit, we're extremely proud of it, but it's a little bit embarrassing in a weird way because we've had this unbelievable level of success. I mean, to put it into perspective, if a winery were to get 100-point score in its career, or 2, it would be considered a tremendous career. We've had 42.
It's like at the Academy Awards, you're embarrassed to get up and accept another.
Yeah, it's like Meryl Streep's like, where am I going to put all these,
right.
Having that sort of thing. And so we've been blessed. And I think when you have a winery that's only really been making wine for 25 years and you think 42, you're having this level of success. And so, the winemaker and owner, Jayson, is he's a genius. He's an iconoclast. And so to work with somebody who's operating at that high of a level, it's really exciting time to be able to work with him and be a partner with him in this journey. It's been great.
Well, like Delphine Circle, I love to surround myself by interested and intelligent people working at the top of their game. So I can only imagine people are levitating over at 100 Acre with all the stuff that you guys are doing. But how is it? I mean, since 2000, when the winery first started, you guys have consistently made the most opulent, the most luxurious, the highest acclaim wine that has really come out of Napa Valley. I mean, how did that happen?
Yeah, it's complicated because, Jayson is the winemaker, but he never went to winemaking school. So 99.9% of all the winemakers, they all went to school at Davis or Bordeaux or Italy or places like that. And so they were taught technically how to make wine. So they make the wines quite technically. Jayson doesn't look anything technical. Everything is, when he talks about winemaking, he talks about it completely emotionally, spiritually. And so his frame of reference to start is just different than everybody else. I'd say one other thing is we have absolutely zero regard for making money. We are totally focused on perfection. And a lot of people say that, but very few people really put themselves at risk all the time from a financial perspective. And I think that not focus on the profit at the end gives him and myself a tremendous freedom to just make magic, and so that separates us from a lot of just businesses in general, but in the wine space especially.
Well, I mean, you say that, but you're as CEO, you're responsible for three brands, six vineyards, annual sales revenues of over 60 million. And in 2 years since taking over as CEO, your revenues have grown 100%.
Yeah.
So there is some thought to the money making, I got to believe.
Well, you know, it's a little bit of like the overnight success that took 10 or 15 years. You know, they see us as being extremely successful now, having the press, having the wines being in such high demand. But people forget what it was like in the beginning. You know, in the first 5, 6, 7, 8 years, people weren't buying the wines. You know, we were making our first wines. Normally when you make a first wine, it's like 100 Acre, you normally would make like a $20 wine. A $40 wine. Your first restaurant is not normally a 3-star Michelin taste. You know, your first restaurant isn't the French Laundry. Right. So for us, we started with this aspiration of making perfection. And imagine, would you go and pay this amount of money for a wine or for a meal where the chef you never heard of, they didn't work somewhere, they didn't have some connectivity to it. So it took time for people to kind of lock in to what we were doing. And then it became truly viral. You know, a couple sommeliers and the first master sommelier at the Bellagio in Las Vegas, when it first opened, tried the wines and was like, you are at the cutting edge of something. And it took time for people to connect to it. And then it became quite frenetic. And now, you know, if you want to buy a bottle of 100 Acre, you have to get on the mailing list. And in 6 years, you'll get 3 bottles. It's a really unique thing, but it did not happen overnight. It was not an overnight success. A lot of blood, sweat, tears, and risk required. But right now, we're really living in a wonderful place, but not sitting on our laurels. We're constantly evolving into new projects and new ways and continuing to find ways to connect with people. So is the winemaking process, I mean, if you were to open a bottle of 2002 or 2003, is the winemaking process still similar to how that was done, or has that process evolved over the years as well? You know, if you ask Jayson, he would say it hasn't changed. I think a lot of times when you see him and he's making wine, it's very lo-fi. It's not a lot of technology, a lot of electricity, a lot of X and Y. He's making it almost like if you were like a couture dressmaker and you're weaving, you're stitching every single bead. All the fabrics are woven. It's done in a very slow, kind of unsexy way in some regards, but it's a purity of process. And so I think he's very committed to that. You know, the technology in wine has changed massively over the last 20 years, and we use very little of that new technology. And I think because he considers himself an artist, he's a craftsman. And you know, modernizing it takes away from some of that handmade craft aspect of it. So he would say different. I think his winemaking style has evolved a bit, not the techniques, but I think his palate, his approach, the same way what you ate when you were in your 20s and what you eat now, and music you listen to, and fashion that you liked in the 80s.
We're all growing.
We're all growing. And so I've seen him evolve, and there's, as much as the wines are rich and luscious and unctuous in so many ways, there's a high level of sophistication in the wines now. There was a rawness, a feralness in the early days as he was sort of coming up and figuring out who he was as an artist. And I think now it's like watching a master crafts person. You know, they're just in their bag, they're in their zone. And it's exciting to see. And to be with him for such a long period of time, I've been able to see his evolution as an artist. And for me, I've evolved. The way I do things, the way he and I interact is radically different than the way we did in the very beginning days.
Interesting. Yeah. Interesting. Well, let's go back to the money aspect though a little bit.
Okay, sure.
Because, you know, from the outside in, people look and say, whatever you do, don't go into the wine business. It is the most risky business. Just do it if you have a passion play, because you're never going to make money in the wine business. And not only have you guys had beautiful wines, but I mean, we think back at, you know, Picasso, all these great artists that were broke, right? So just having a beautiful product and being able to be creative does not necessarily mean you're going to be a financial success.
Yeah.
So what do you think, what are the tools, what are the keys to being financially successful in the wine business? Yeah,
I mean, the old adage in wine is that if you want to make a little bit of money, start with a ton of it. And that's kind of how you go. I mean, I probably get called 3 to 4 times a month from very successful people. They want to buy a winery, they want to start, and I do everything in my power to convince them not. I say, here's how you start your winery. Go take $100 million in cash, take it into a field, cover it in gasoline, and then burn it. And if you're still in the game after that, then I believe you that you're crazy enough. For Jayson and for us, we did not start with a lot of money. We started very lo-fi, started with a vineyard. We didn't own a winery. We built the winery 5 years later. We bought a piece of property. We were making wine in other people's wineries. We were like leasing their space when they weren't there. I mean, it was done very lo-fi. But in Napa, if you want to get started, you need $100 million. That's the cost of poker right now in Napa's 50, maybe 100 million is, which is going to take, but we didn't start that particular way. I think the secret to our success was we had a very, very clear vision of what we wanted to do. And regardless of what everybody said, we stayed true to that vision. And really, I think with all good entrepreneurs or artists, really the more people tell you it's not going to work, the more you should dig in, because people are haters. Most people won't risk it all. They're more risk adverse naturally. So people, I don't know, are you going to risk it all? Are you going to do this and that? And I think what Jayson would tell you is it's all his own money. So for him, he's taking all the risk. He doesn't have investors. He doesn't have people coming in from different places. So it's fearful in some regards, but it's liberating. He doesn't have to ask, his board of directors, can I do this? Can I do that? And I think that freedom from a winemaking and artistic perspective is what gives him the ability to push beyond sort of what the rest of the world is doing from a winemaking perspective. I mean, when he first started, he was vilified. You have all these sort of institutional winemakers, people that had 20 years of experience, and a guy comes in from Canada, no winemaking experience, and says, I'm going to blow your doors off. I'm going to revolutionize the industry. And all of them are like, no.
So that was the attitude he had coming in the door.
Oh yeah. He's like, I see a lot of pomp and circumstance and very little commitment to expertise, to excellence. And as the more and more that he was shunned, he sort of, that became his armor. He sort of became like the anti-hero because he was a non-establishment player. It's like if you go to, you're in business and everybody went to Harvard, Columbia, and Wharton, and then you come in and say, oh, I got a high school education and I'm going to, change the game. The institution discourages that. They don't want that.
Everybody was laughing at him behind his back.
Yeah. And I think now they sort of have this thought of whoa, okay, I guess he was right. And he's a very complex individual, very eccentric. He's sometimes a bit reclusive, but I've never met anybody that just believes so much in what he's doing. And I think for me, as working for him and being a partner with him, my job is to facilitate. He's an artist. My mother was an artist. My grandmother was an artist. My job is to help the artist express, but also create safety. I'm like scaffolding. He's inside, he's blowing things up, he's remodeling, and I'm creating a safe atmosphere around him, but not restricting his art. And that's I think if you were to say, what's my gift, is to give artists and creatives space to be themselves, but also make it financially successful for them without restricting. If you told my mother, who was a successful businesswoman and artist early in her career, you can't do it this way or we're not going to make money, she would be paralyzed artistically because now she's thinking about that and she's not expressing fully her work. And that's what Jayson, you can't tell him no, because then he loses his rhythm. And that's why a lot of people can't do it. You talked about, financially, people think that if I come to Napa, even with $100 million, I get the fanciest winery, the fanciest winemaker, the fanciest labels. I get Hermes to do my bottle. I have, all these, Shia Day as my PR, whatever. Almost none of them succeed because it isn't about money. It's about point of view. It's about just undying commitment to that point of view. And that's, people say that a lot, but very few people put themselves in harm's way. Fashion, real estate, restaurateurs. Restaurateurs are sort of like winemakers. It's a very high risk business, and 9 out of 10 of them go out of business. But the 1 out of 10 that can be Thomas Keller, Daniel Boulud, Grant Achatz, all these different great chef Dominique Crenn, they're reckless. There's a recklessness there. And that's the secret to their success. Yeah.
I mean, I do love wine, but I'm not going to profess in any way that I'm a wine expert. And, I look at it kind of objectively, like you would look at anything. You say, okay, well, wine is like art, right? It's the taste, the love, the beauty is in the eye of the beholder or the taster.
Sure.
And grapes are grapes. Like, how is it that something has been done so differently? How is it that's been something that's really just stood out? Do you think that there's a fanaticism that comes with it? Like, it's just, he's such the icon, like people love him, and so they're just going to love what he does? Or do you really think that the wine is just so unique and so different to the way wines are made otherwise?
So the reason we make wine out of grapes, okay, you can make wine out of almost anything, any fruit. As long as it has sugar in it, you can make wine. You add yeast and you can make mead as honey wine. You ever go to Hawaii, they're making pineapple wine. It's all wine. It's technically wine. It's tragically terrible and disgusting. But the reason we make wine out of grapes is because grapes have, there's called esters and aldehydes. They're the chemicals inside the grape that make it smell and taste. And it has the largest array of them of any fruit. So basically, when you smell a cherry, it's a combination of an ester and aldehyde that's making that smell and that taste. Grapes have hundreds of those, and every time you make them, the combination can change. And so a grape is not a grape is not a grape. You can grow grapes in your backyard, spend all this money, and they won't get there. 90% of it is the land. The French call it the terroir. The terroir isn't just the dirt. It's the microclimate. It's the bees. It's the forages. It's the wind directions. It's the frost patterns. It's the direction the sun comes up and down. It's an ecosystem. So first and foremost, you have to find sacred earth. And Jayson would tell you that his real like if it's shamanistic, he is an earth, like dirt worshiper of the highest regard. He goes into places and feels it. He says, I've seen 1,000 vineyards, and I walk in and I have a metaphysical experience, an emotional connectivity to this ground. And actually our very first vineyard, this will express it even further. Our very first vineyard, called Kaylee Morgan, now it's called Morgan's Way, his daughter is Morgan, was a very low quality Sauvignon Blanc vineyard. It made $10 wine. And he and his farming partner knew this was sacred earth. It just wasn't given the love and the attention. They replanted the vineyard, turned it into Cabernet, and now it's the most expensive land in all of Napa Valley. But thousands of winemakers drove by that every day and saw that as being something, the dirt combination, the too much clay, too much glass, too much obsidian. It has volcanic glass everywhere, black glass all over the vineyard. It looks like a broken disco ball in the afternoon because Mount St. Helena exploded 10 years ago and rained down this volcanic glass everywhere. He realized this is sacred earth. And that's his approach to the vineyard sites. And so grapes are not a grape, certainly. And then it comes down to point of view, like a fashion, when you buy fashion from a designer, you're buying their point of view. Anyone can sew and make a mini skirt or make a corset or make a suit coat or something. But the point of view is that sort of X factor that sort of takes we're going to do the darting a different way. We're going to do the stitching a different pattern and X and Y. And, and those are the sort of the finishing touches that take you to a different place.
Oh my God, that makes so much sense to me when you put it in that perspective.
Yeah, I mean, I think everybody, even when people don't love wine or just like I just like to drink wine, I say, what are you into? There's something you'll spend a lot of money on. Is it watches? Is it shoes? Is it toy train sets? Is it Beanie Baby? Whatever, something in your life that people look at you and say, you paid $100 for that? That looks like a glass. Yeah, it is a glass, but it was made from X and Y, and it has, these different colors. And so
it's in the subtleties.
It's in the subtleties, and I think wine is like that. Now, the more expensive the wine gets, the differences become smaller and smaller. though. I mean, it is like a law of diminishing returns. When you get to a wine like 100 Acre that's $700 to $1,000 a bottle, every $100 more you spend, you're getting like incremental differences. And it does take a certain level of sophistication. I wouldn't say sophistication like in a bougie term, but experience. I've tasted 10,000, 10,000 wines. My mother is from Fort Wayne, Indiana. We grew up on tuna casserole and Budweiser. So she laughs and I sell fancy wine and eat fancy food. And, I tell her, Mom, we could go to Mastro's. She's just as happy at Outback. She goes, they have filet mignons at Outback too. For her, that filet, she doesn't appreciate the marbling and the grass-fed and the X and Y. But in paint, in canvases, in sewing machines, Singer sewing machine, she would, be musing on everything. I'm like, Mom, it's a sewing machine. Oh, that's an old one. Can't we get a new sewing machine? She's like, no, I need the wheel. I need the feel of the pedal. And for her, she's vibing, and so we all have those types of things. And wine is such a multifaceted thing. And I think that's what makes it dynamic.
Yeah. I love that explanation. Thank you so much, Landon.
I just made that up. Wasn't that good? No,
job.
I'm joking. It was all
Good
true.
job.
All true. All true.
So I know you guys recently purchased 2 new vineyards, 3 new vineyards.
Yeah.
2 new wine brands.
Yeah.
Coming off the success of 100 Acre, what was the thought process behind launching, 2 new brands?
Yeah. I think you get to a certain point. I mean, I think it does come down to art. From that, like an artistic desire, it's like, Pablo Picasso made art on his deathbed. For him, it wasn't about, commerce. It was about, he had a feeling inside of himself he needed to express. And that's how we are. I mean, 100 Acre, we could just stop now. We could just keep doing what we're doing and be, extremely iconic and successful.
Go for 100 points.
Yeah, you know what I mean? Or, just call it a day and say, thank you. We planted the flag and go. But I think Jayson has a desire to find new sacred earth. So Fortunate Son, our new project from Napa Valley, is about him going. Actually, I kind of, I don't say the tagline, but I came up with, the future is the past. So we are now going back to the early vineyards that started the Napa Valley in the 1860s. Our winery was. It's now the home of Fortunate Son, was first planted in 1860. It was the 4th winery in Napa Valley. The sacred earth, that was worked by immigrants that came west with horse and plow. And the vineyards sort of go into disrepair, 6, 7 generations.
Do they have old vines on it?
They do have old vines and old, but it hasn't been given, it's like when you walk into an old home, some people go, oh, this is an old home. Other people say, if we take this wall out, we're going to refinish this wood. We're going to stain it. We're going to refurbish, and that's what we're doing with that. And we're working with all these heritage vineyard sites. So these are families that are 3rd and 4th generation farming families. And we're starting to engage them and work with their properties. And Jayson's sort of showing them his farming techniques and the way he approaches the winemaking. And then the other project is called Summer Dreams. It's a Pinot Noir project, Pinot and Chardonnay. Now it's in the Sonoma Coast. So
Chardonnay,
Sauvignon Blanc, we're making amazing white wines. And the way to think of the Sonoma Coast, the Western Sonoma Coast, would be like, imagine having vines in like Newport Coast. Or, on Emerald Bay. I mean, it's basically steep sloped hillsides right next to the sea. Different climate, different microclimate. You get fog, you get wind, you get rain. But then when you get these beautiful sunny days, it's like the greatest day on the planet. And it's that tension between that maritime influence and sort of the hillside microclimates that create these magic wines. And normally, very rarely, winemakers are not good at making white wines and Pinot Noir. It's sort of like, it's like a different discipline. You don't have somebody who's a great French chef and also a great Italian chef. They're sort of poles. And I think
is this Jayson's first time at white wine?
He's made a little white wine in the past, but sort of like side hustle type stuff. And then this is his like first cannonball. And, I gotta say, this will like pinpoint just the genius of him as a winemaker. The Sauvignon Blanc, the first Sauvignon Blanc that we made was the 2020 vintage. It's called Walking on Venice Beach is the name of the Sauvignon Blanc. got the highest rated score in the history of this particular wine critic. He literally said, "This is the single greatest Sauvignon Blanc I've ever had from America." First shot. And you know why? Because it tastes totally different. It is like a completely, everybody else is playing checkers and he's playing chess. The textures, the aromatics, the vineyard sourcing. He's actually using, normally wines are aged in French oak or stainless steel barrels. We're actually using wood, acacia wood, which acacia is a sacred tree. It's actually the burning bush from Moses was an acacia bush. And so we're using unique exotic oaks or woods, this acacia wood, these pink stave acacia woods that are creating different aromatic textures. And so we're pushing the envelope, you know, and I think once again, he's free.
So what determines a Sauvignon Blanc then? Is it the grape? Because it seems like it's very different. Why would it be called a Sauvignon Blanc?
Well, Sauvignon Blanc is like, it's like the breed, you know, it's like a Labrador, you know what I mean? But some can be big, some can be small, some can be chocolate, some can be long-haired. Sauvignon Blanc is the grape. Actually, the name Sauvignon is two French words, sauvage, which is wild, and vigna, vine. So Sauvignon Blanc means a white wild vine. Cabernet Sauvignon is also in the wild vine genus. So if you were to plant that in your backyard, it would grow up your house like a bougainvillea. It's like a feral vine. It'll just take it over. So the secret to that is you want to tame the wildness. If it's allowed to just grow wild, it'll produce fruit, but at a low quality level. So you almost treat it like a bonsai bush. You're kind of like shaping it and feeding it and starving it and giving it all this, like the way you manage the leaves and the canopy are different. And so that's how the wine changes flavor. You know, but if you're taking like a Sauvignon Blanc from New Zealand, well, in New Zealand, a 70-degree day is a warm day there. It's cool there. It's very misty. It's very maritime. So the wines are not so fruity. They have a lot of acidity, citrus, mineralities to them. They're very fresh. Good on the patio. We call them like a patio pounder. You know, it's like great summer wine. Our Sauvignon Blanc is a little richer. It's a little more textural because it's from a different soil type and a different, from a warmer climate.
So will these new brands be of a similar price point to the 100 Acre brands, or are you going to kind of go after a little less expensive? Yes.
They're definitely different price points. You know, 100 Acre has, bottles between $700 and $1,000 a bottle. It's definitely rare air. Fortunate Son is wines between $175 and $400 a bottle, still very premium wines. And then Summer Dreams is, our Pinot Noir Chardonnay Sauvignon Blanc brand is between $80 and $130 a bottle. And, all those wines they're all made at a very, very high level, right? I like to use fashion. I bring it up a lot. It's like if 100 Acre is like a couture dress, this is the next tier down, still extremely high-end materials, a lot of hand basting and a lot of, hand stitching, but, a little bit the vineyard sites, or maybe we haven't, farmed them as long. We haven't invested in them over a long period of time. So, over time they may grow in price as we invest more money into them and as we refine the vineyards, but they'll definitely be a little bit more accessible.
Well, and feels good, right? It feels good that you can provide your products to people of varying socioeconomic classes, because what you make is so good. And it's so nice that, people have an opportunity to try it, right?
Great wine doesn't have to be super expensive. I was just in Spain last week and we were drinking $8 bottles of wine that were fantastic, and they say, how come I can't find an $8 bottle of wine here in California? Well, the land's expensive, the labor's expensive, just the economics are more expensive. So just getting wine in California, you're paying like taxes, land, all those types of things. So it's $30 if before you even got started. So the economics are slightly different there. But, also like, for example, a Sauvignon Blanc is not really aged in French oak. It's a very small amount of it. So French oak is very expensive. The barrels can range between $1,200 to $2,400 per barrel. And if you're aging them for 2-3 years, you're spending a lot of costs there. Also, just imagine when we talked about not making money in wine, you make a wine, it sits in a barrel for 3 years. You don't get any money. You're paying the rent, you're paying all the work, you're managing the wines, the lights on, you're having new vintages coming in and you're paying. So it's a very cash heavy business. So a lot of that also is, how long, the cost of holding and storing and maintaining. But for us to make wines at a very high level, that aging process is very important. So it's a big part of what we do.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
So tell me a little bit about the labels, right?
Okay.
Because I know that there's a real art and a little bit of a science that goes into making a beautiful label. You guys have obviously done a great job with the new ones. I always am a person, I tend to like a more simple label.
Sure.
I don't know why. It seems more higher end to me when it's a little more simple. What is the thought process that goes into creating a new label?
Yeah, labels are tricky, right? I mean, a lot of wine, 90% of wine, they spend all their money on marketing, right? Because, for example, you go to a wine shop, especially women, it's highly, highly directed at women. What do? They pick it up because of the label. The label is the first thing that gets them. And normally when you pick a wine up, you have a very high chance of buying it. You very rarely pick it up and then put it back. So they're doing everything they can to get you to pick that bottle up. I think for us, we've focused on making labels that are high end, but there's a simplicity to them. I mean, for example, if you just look at this label, you say, okay, it's simple. It has 100 Acre, it has the stars, it has this, the vintage. But in reality, if you come up to the label more closely, there's embossing. In here, it says, fate, this is a story of a man that was never at a loss for words. He traveled the world and learned the minds of men. That's from Homer's Odyssey. This is 24 karat gold that's glazed into the glass. So these are subtle things. This wax is Canadian beeswax that's from Jayson's hometown. So these are small details that make the wines, you want to be elegant and high-end, but gaudy. It's like the old Coco Chanel thing, put on all your accessories and then take one off before you leave the house. Like, you got to find that right balance between elegance, flair, but also like a little bit of restraint. And so we focus on that. Like the Fortunate Son label is like a micro suede. It has a tactileness to it. And so these are little subtle tones of what we're doing that's different than other people. So it's a fine line for sure. I think we do a nice job, but it takes us years to develop these. I mean, this label you're seeing now for 100 Acres had many slight iterations over a 20-year period of time of just slight tweaks as it just continues to grow.
Well, you're doing a good job there. Those are gorgeous. So let's talk a little bit about the distribution, because I know that 100 Acre wines are very limited, difficult to get. What is the production level like, and what are your distribution channels?
Well, we don't really say how much we make, but I always like to say we make it, we talk about the wines that we make in hundreds of cases, not thousands of cases. I mean, everything we make is very small production. We sell them in 3-packs. So normally you buy a case of wine, you get 12 bottles. We sell it in 3-bottle packs. So we're trying to make it in smaller pieces so more people can enjoy them. The majority of our wines are sold to collectors. So 70% of our wines are sold to our collectors. If you go to 100acre.com and you put your email in, join the list, it's about a 6-year waiting list to get 3 bottles.
Wow.
I mean, it's just really a long time. But part of that, it's like, man, people really want you. The more the list, it's like if you go to a restaurant, you can get right in. I don't know, you're not as excited about it as one that you had to like call a friend and the line's around the corner and you're, pulling all the strings. And then the rest of it we sell to, restaurants. So like restaurants, hotels, so everything from, Pelican Hill to Mastro's to French Laundry to these types of places. We really try to work with chef-driven restaurants. They're as focused on the craft of their work as we are on the winemaking. And then we actually sell the wines in 60 countries. So we have a huge global footprint. I mean, we joke, we'll take your euro, we'll take your ruble, we'll take your yen, we'll take whatever. And, but it's been a great grand adventure. I mean, I was just launched our wines in Malaysia. I was in Jakarta, Indonesia, and launching our wines. And it's like going to just like a foreign land where the wine is not, there's no culture of wine there. So you're like going out there and trying to, educate them.
This comes from grapes.
Yes. The upside of Asia is they love a label. They're big into brands, so they know it's expensive. So they're interested in it, but we don't just sell it to them because it's expensive. We want you to like understand what we're about, and you'll appreciate it on a larger level and a higher level over time.
Yeah. And it was funny because when I first heard of 100 Acre, I thought, oh, that's cool. It's probably, named after the vineyard and the 100 acres that it was grown on. But I read recently that it's actually Winnie the Pooh's home from 100 Acre Wood.
Yes. So Jayson's from Canada, and when he was in, there's kind of two parts to the story. When he was in high school, he grew up in Edmonton, which is like a forest. It's like the redwoods. And so he used to run through the forest, and he always considered that like his 100-acre wood. That was a place of sanctuary for him. And then when we first bought the first property for 100 Acre, it was a forested hillside, and he has triplets. So his second round of kids, he has one older son, and then he has triplets, 2 boys, 1 girl. So it wasn't like identical. And they were like 5 years old, and he used to read them Winnie the Pooh, and he used to say, hey, this is your 100-acre wood. So although we only had like 9 acres, we were going like, we were being aspirational that one day we'd have 100, but we started with 9 or 11, or just like a very small amount.
Mm-hmm. So I know you're a sommelier.
Yeah.
Do you have any say in the actual creation of the product, or are you strictly more on the business side? I
mean, I would say, Jayson he explains it like this. He's Genesis, I'm Exodus. Okay. He creates the wines, and I'm like lead them out of Egypt. You know what I mean? I take them out into the world. I would say Jayson respects my palate in a big way. He knows I know what's happening in the world. He tries to be quite insulated though. He doesn't want to hear what the trend is. This is hot. He's like, this is going to affect how I make wine. So where he really focuses for me is when we talk about what are the wines we want to make. What prices, what regions, he trusts he knows I know what's going to be successful. Sometimes he'll make, and oftentimes he completely disregards it, but I think what he trusts about me is that I'm not BSing him. This is, I'm telling you how I feel. And, he takes it under advisement and he sort of goes. But as I said, I try to facilitate. He's allowed me to name some of the wines. I've been involved in design discussions, but really this is his expression. I'm going to highlight something that people probably don't realize. Very few owners of wineries are the winemaker.
Really?
Almost none. You go to Napa Valley, less than 1% of the wineries, it's an owner winemaker. So for him, it's not just his company, his business, it's his venue. It's his vehicle for artistic expression. And so that changes the calculus for him. Whereas, we'll use Harlan, very successful wine, but Bill's businesses are not wine. He's a real estate guy. He owns, land, he owns buildings, he owns commercial spaces, and he made money early on there. So yes, he cares very much about his wines, but he's not a winemaker. He's a businessman, and a very good businessman. But so as I said, his calculus and approach are just quite different.
So in terms of like the day-to-day with Jayson, is he a micromanager? Does he like to get involved in the business aspect of it? Does he really just, want to stay away from that? I mean, what is that relationship like?
It's evolved over time. I think in our current roles, it's really a fabulous relationship because my job is to clear the way for him to do what he does best. Yes, he owns a business. He has to manage banks and do these types of things and financing and acquisitions. But I clear as much of that out of the way for him so he can do art. And, it requires a lot of trust, though. You've built this business. You put all your own money into it, and you allow somebody to run it. I mean, how many CEOs crash a business? Or the founder takes a step back and hires a CEO, and all of a sudden, you've got a calamity on your hands. And so we have a tremendous amount of trust, and I focus on clearing the decks for him. So I run the sales, marketing, distribution, acquisitions, permitting. I mean, people don't realize a winery is 5 businesses. It's a farm. It's a winemaking business. It's a manufacturing business because you're making wines, you're boxing them, it's a logistics business, and it's a real estate development business as well. And so they require a lot of different disciplines.
You got to wear all those hats.
Got to wear a lot of those hats. I think people were like, man, isn't the wine business just the best? And it is the best business, but it is a real business, and it's complex in that regard. And so, but I love that. I'm kind of an ADD kid. So for me to go from different disciplines is just fabulous for me.
Well, and you have a long history in the wine business. I mean, the 100 Acre was not your first rodeo.
Yeah.
I was reading in your bio that you were instrumental, or actually led the charge to bring Oyster Bay from New Zealand, which I love Oyster Bay. I'm going to say it. I love it, screw top and all.
Yeah.
Tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, that was a really fascinating deal. I was working for a winery before that called Chalk Hill, which is a well-known white wine producer in Russian River Valley. And my mentor, the first person who was my first real boss in the industry, took me under his wing. He left the company and he asked me to come with him. And he said, hey, I'm leaving the company to work for a property winery called Oyster Bay. And my first response was, never heard of them. He goes, oh, well, they're huge. They're huge in Europe. Like, it's like a joke, like you're a band, you haven't made it in America. We're huge in Scandinavia.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay. And I started listening. And apparently it was this really special business, a family-owned business, the Delegate family in New Zealand. And they came to America last. They had all this business in Canada, all this business in the UK and in Europe, but they had never come. They kind of missed the New Zealand wave. And so when we were launching the wines in America, nobody wanted them. I mean, we go to distributors and they're like, no, we have too much New Zealand. We don't need any more. And so
Crawford's already here.
Kim Crawford's here, Brancod's here, Nobilo, Matua. I mean, you go into a grocery store, there's 50 Sauvignon Blancs from New Zealand. So for us to come in and now it's like the number 2 or number 3 wine, it required kind of that guerrilla warfare approach. Like, it was like, pick and shovel work. It was very unsexy in a lot of ways, but that's how brands are built. I mean, very rarely is a brand an overnight success. It requires passion and commitment. And so that was a really exciting thing for me. And I think my career, really, if you look at my career, it's been about launching and developing brands, working with, not brands, wineries, working with families, people that have they know how to make wine or they're great farmers. And then I help build the scaffolding around them to be successful. And so the more talented they are and dysfunctional, I tend to be generally more attracted to them because I can live and breathe in that dysfunction, not necessarily have them lose their secret sauce, but then help them channel that energy into something productive. And I've several of the companies I've worked for have sold for hundreds of millions of dollars after I was gone. And that was a tremendous joy for me because I was able to take them from the edge of bankruptcy or garage winemaking to, businesses that could be, millions and millions of cases of wine.
I want to be in business with you, Landon.
Come on down. Let's go. Delphine. I mean, you've got a great name for a wine. I mean, Delphine Cellars. Or
onto something,
Chateau Delphine. I mean, it sounds pretty much like it could be a French property immediately,
We're doing it.
That's go.
It. So we do a little something here called the big questions.
Ooh, dun, dun, dun. Is there music that gets added to this portion?
Because all these other questions were little questions.
Yes.
Do you have any consistent daily routines?
Yeah. I mean, I have a pretty consistent spiritual practice, that I started about 4 years ago. Before this started, I was what I would consider like a warlord, a savage work animal. I was working, traveling. I was traveling 180 days a year for 20 years, taking on new projects. My work, my achievement was how I defined myself. The more successful I was, the better I was, the more value I had. I came from my childhood, which was a long story, but with a lot of successful people, that happens. They just have to the only way they know to fix themselves or to balance themselves is more throttle, faster, more projects, X and Y. And I hit a point in my life where I had 2 things happen. I got divorced, had a kind of a quick marriage, a 4-year marriage with no children. And then we had also sold 3 wineries. So I'd had this great career success moment where we had this big sale. And also my personal life was in just shambles. And I had a moment of saying, Landon, you said that if you were super successful, you'd be so happy and you'd have your stuff together. And I was the most successful I'd ever been and the least happy and least spiritually fit that I ever was. And I took a moment, like a monastic year, that year, and it was right before COVID. So it was a year before COVID. And I started a meditation practice. I started a breathwork practice. I started reading, delving extremely deeply in just like spirituality and awareness and understanding your ego and how to process all those things. And I realized that, you know, when you have a big moment that you're pushing to, right? You say, when I get to that moment, I'm going to be happy. So that moment happened. And the next day I woke up and I was miserable because I didn't even have the goal anymore. The goal was gone. So all my entire identity was wrapped up in this goal, and I was in this empty space. And I took a year of no dating, fasting, and really taking inventory of myself from a spiritual perspective. Got into, everything from Eckhart Tolle to, Sadhguru to Ram Dass to, all these different types of spiritual teachers, the Bible, many other types of things. And I found that I needed to pause. I used to work out like a fiend. Then I started saying, I'm going to work out, instead of an hour and 15-minute workout every day, I'm going to work out 40 minutes a day and have 30 minutes of spiritual time. And so my daily practice is I wake up, I have my cup of coffee, I read. I have about 10 pages or 12 pages of something that I read. I'm not reading to get to the next chapter. I'm just exercising my brain. Then I journal. I sometimes do stream of consciousness writing. I write whatever I'm feeling. Sometimes I write about what I just read. And then I meditate. And then I do breath work or mantra meditations. And that 30 minutes, 35 minutes is my sacred time. Nothing is more important than that time. My workouts can be skipped. My a meal can be skipped, but my spiritual time is the center of my peace. And I was able to completely shift my perspective. I basically had to change how I felt, how I scored things, how I valued things, threw it out completely. And I became the most joyful person that I've ever been. And I thought that I would work less hard and I'd be less of a savage and I'd be less successful. And now I'm far more successful and I'm happier. But if the success went away, I'd still be happy. And that's a key part. So that daily, it's like anything, it's consistency. But that reading, journaling, meditating, I've given that, and I've taught a lot of people that are sort of executives that are in this kind of go place. And then the last thing, I share a spiritual practice with my wife. We try to do a lot of that together. Sunday mornings, we read to each other in bed. We have a book, we read back and forth, we listen, we keep our close to each other, like physically close, touching. And it's intimacy without intimacy, it's like spiritual intimacy. And when we kind of get a little wobbly, like we're getting like busy, we go, did we miss our spiritual connectivity time? And we go, oh, we didn't prioritize it this week. And then it's like, to the bed, get the book, get the what have you. We're reading Untethered Soul right now by Michael Singer, which is it's a book you need to read. I've read it a few times, and now we're reading it together. And it's like, it's really amazing to share. And we also do therapy and spiritual work together. Not when we have a problem. We don't wait till we have a problem. We do it weekly or twice a month so that we get ahead of the problem.
Absolutely.
And so that's key.
Oh my God, Landon. You're kindred spirit.
Yes.
I love this.
Are we in the full vibe here?
Oh my God.
Actually, your shoes, they're starting to flutter. They're starting to be a pixie fairy wing vibe going. Yes, I love it. I love it.
Wow. Amazing stuff. Tell me something that people would be surprised to know about you.
I'm actually a closet introvert.
I would be surprised to know.
Yeah. I mean, my life is an extroverted place. I public speak for a living. I'm traveling. I'm working with chefs. I'm doing press. I'm doing all these types of things, but I really enjoy being at home. In my early days, there's a energy transfer that happens when you're in your your forward self, when you're being extroverted and you're channeling energy to somebody else. You're shifting that energy. And as I've gotten older and older, I'm not able to recover that energy at the same rate that I was when I was younger. And it's made me a bit more introverted in my personal life. I like to be at home more. I like to be in my special places. And so the people that know me well kind of see that evolution. It's not a bad thing, but most people see this kind of big personality in a guy who's good at turning it on. But that's a big part of me now. And I love that part of me.
Well, and they say that that is a sign of becoming more spiritual.
Yeah.
That we just crave that one-on-one time.
Yeah.
With ourselves.
Yeah. Well, it's that inner
One-on-one.
space. Yeah, it's that inner space, you know.
Part of why I moved to the desert.
Yes, I'm telling you.
Yeah, it's good stuff. Well, while we're on the subject, what's the purpose of life? Why do you think we're here?
I mean, I really do believe that we're here in service of the people. You know, I'm really big on service, being there for people, holding space for people, not always fixing their problems, but being around there. I'm extremely philanthropic. It stems from, like, key part of my spiritual practice is gratitude, is being totally in my gratitude space at all times, no matter what's happening. And so that sense of gratitude then leads me to life's purpose, which is about, you know, being there for your fellow man and fellow woman. And I think that there's just nothing better in the world than to be there for somebody.
It's so edifying, right?
Yeah.
You forget how good it feels.
Yeah. And there's a fine line. I mean, I came from in my early days, it was very codependent. Fixing people. That's not being there for people. Holding space, holding people accountable. Accountability, and then mercy and grace, back and forth. And so I think that's really the meaning of life. And you've had several people that I know on Delphine's circle, Carrie Hyden and David Heil, and they're all very successful and they're all extremely philanthropic. And I think they both, part of their kid-like nature is this, like, desire to, like, give back, and that keeps them sort of young and revitalized from a personal and a spiritual perspective.
It's so true.
Yeah,
absolutely. So tell me, what's a piece of advice that you were given that served you well?
Humility is the greatest superpower. That is the greatest. And when it was served to me, I was 24 years old and I disregarded it completely. I couldn't, a 24-year-old career guy who's out trying to get their humility was not sexy. Swagger, savoir-faire, arrogance, style, outward things was important to me. Winning, defeating, conquering, all those types of things. And you realize that humility is a big superpower. And the reason I say it's a superpower is that often, like superpowers, they also can be big weaknesses. If you don't embrace humility and make it a big part of your internal life, the world will humble you. You will get humility. You either drink it yourself or it's served on you, and it's served to you in generally quite painful ways. And and it's not always bad that you get humility in that particular way. But I used to be the guy that walked into the room and thought I was the, biggest, baddest mofo in the room. And now I come into the room and I know that I'm great at what I do, but I come from a more open and humble space, and I'm able to receive energy and knowledge from people so much more readily now because of that internal humility. I don't need to be the badass all the time. And that comes with time. It comes with failure. It comes with, I think if you want to have a successful marriage, especially an A-type like me, you better learn to be humble. Because, as every married person has said, sometimes you win and you actually lose. Most of the time when you win, you lose in relationships like that. And that humility to understand that and be present is critical there. That's my superpower.
Oh my gosh, I love that one too.
I would have rather had like super strength or like flying or like laser beams or something, but I guess humility will have to suffice.
Well, and why I think that is so true is because when you are humble and when you can allow somebody else to take the lead, when you can, it comes across as very intelligent and it comes across as very confident.
Yeah.
And the person who's the loudest person in the room, who's trying to get the attention, who's saying how amazing they are, it actually comes across the opposite of that.
Yeah, they're generally the weakest. I mean, they say the loudest
what they're
voice,
trying to get, it's not landing well, right?
Yeah, 100%.
So, I totally agree with that. Tell me something that you used to believe, but you don't anymore.
I used to believe that people don't change. You know, they don't change. They are who they are, that they're stuck in their ways. Oh, you're a X, Y, and Z, and that's who you are. And I realized that that's true unless you want to change. If you make the desire to change, I mean, we're changing all the time. And that willingness and openness to change is a big deal. But, you know, some people say that people don't really change. Oh my gosh, I've changed. I'm the phoenix daily, coming out of the ashes and renewing. And I relish that. I relish that change, and I seek that change and that metamorphosis and that energy exchange. And so that's something I used to hear about all the time, but it's a complete myth if you're willing to change.
Oh my God, I could not agree more. In fact, my last interview with Dr. Patrick Porter of Brain Tap, he brought that up. He said, you know, people think that they are a specific way, or that they are, you know, I am this way. And he goes, our cellular turnover is complete. You're not the same person every 2 years.
Yeah.
So if you're holding on to anything, it's because you've decided to hold on to that. So with that in mind, and understanding that we're made of energy instead of, you know, this stuck matter, this thing that we were, you know, led to believe, really, I think helps to support that.
Yeah, I mean, it's proven spiritually and scientifically that matter, you know, thermodynamics says energy is changing and transmuting at all times. There's nothing you can do to stop it. Yeah. So you better ride it.
And it's based on our thoughts.
Yeah, absolutely. No doubt on thoughts. No doubt.
Good answer. Tell me a goal you've yet to reach.
This is going to be probably a little bit of a simple one, but to be a father. You know, I'm 44, having our first child in August. And, you know, we didn't talk about it, but I had quite a rocky upbringing. And I made a commitment to myself in my 20s and 30s, and certainly as I began my spiritual journey, that I was not going to serve that to my child. No generational trauma, that I was going to cleanse myself of that energy. And when I became a parent, I was going to come with, you know, knowledge, power, and humility. And I think the opportunity now to bring that to a child and know that I, number one, lived up to probably my number one biggest promise to myself. And then number two, to be able to experience that with a child. And you want to talk about humility, you're a mom and beyond, nothing humbles you like a child. You know what I mean? And it humbles you over and over again in so many ways. And I think that's really a goal for me. And, you know, on a professional level, I'm living my dreams in every way right now. I mean, my partner, Jayson, and I, we are like trying new things. We're building a distillery right now, or buying properties. We're building things. It's like the world is our oyster. And I think it's a special thing. And I'm just enjoying that ride in a big way.
It's like what happens when all your dreams come true, right?
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. For sure. And I think it's what happens when all your dreams come true when you're not focused on having all your dreams come true. It's like the second you disassociate yourself from that destination, then all of a sudden your dreams come true every day, not some giant dream or this massive thing. You know, there's big ones. And then there's, you know, this morning, a dream came true. I woke up next to somebody I love so deeply, and I had every single opportunity on the planet available to me this morning. Mm-hmm. That's the dream.
Do you know if you're having a boy or girl?
We're going old school. We don't know. So it will be, if it's a girl, it will be Phoenix. Ooh. And a boy will be Zion. So we're going to find out. My wife is not a surprise person. She's like wants to know, but we
really were like,
you know, I think she embraced it, but she's like somebody who's not good at keeping a secret or having a surprise. So you walk into every baby appointment and the first thing you say is, don't, because it's, we don't want to know. Yeah. And so yeah, we don't know, but we're ready for the ride. And it's just like, what a blessing.
Oh my gosh. I'm so excited for you guys. I know you just got back from a trip to Spain.
Yeah.
And I know that you really love Italian and Spanish wines.
Yeah.
What was it? Do you get to travel for vacation for your personal stuff and try different wines, or what does your personal life look like in your?
I'm trying new wine every day. You know, I mean, people always ask me, Landon, what's your favorite wine? And I would say the next wine is my favorite wine. Like, you know, there's millions of wines. And once I get to 2 million, I know I got there. Spain is always a wonderful place because the food and the wines are so good, but wine is not sacred to them. It's like bread. It's a part of their daily life. And so there's a casual connection to wine there. Whereas wine in America is a little bit more status driven. It's a lifestyle thing and is generally associated with affluency. Whereas, you go to a restaurant and you get the house wine, it's $2 a glass, pretty good. Yeah. Because it's not so bougie there. And so I love that. And we were just in Barcelona and then Mallorca, and we're having, wines from the mountain hillsides of Mallorca. And it was like, oh, good. Oh man, let me have some of that.
Right. I remember we went to Spain and we went to, I'm such a foodie. And so I always try to find the best, highest rated restaurants. And we went to the highest rated restaurant and ordered the most expensive bottle of wine on their menu, and it was $60.
Yeah. So, that would get you like a scary bottle of wine at Mastro's.
Yeah, exactly.
I always pick on them because they have such a great wine list, but it's an expensive spot. But
So true. First of all, what is that pin on your lapel?
So this is one of the great joys of fashion. It's a stag. Okay. So some people think it's a reindeer, but it's a stag. And I got this in Finland. And, this is one of the great finds on the planet because every time I wear it, I get a lot of compliments on it. And it was $30. So we love that, right? You spend all this money on suits and clothes and all this type of stuff. And it's like, you find this cool little thing that nobody can go buy. And I've been wearing it for 5 years. The tie is sort of going away. We used to wear ties all the time. And so now like the pocket square and the lapel pin is now the new power move. So that's it.
It's very, very cool. Yeah. Dave will be impressed with that.
He's complimented it. I said, David, I think your next vibe is the stag vibe.
Right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Amazing. So good having you here, Landon.
It was lovely. Thank you. I had such a blast.
You're my new favorite cool person.
Yes, you too. Deal.
Thank you for tuning in to this episode of Delphine Circle. Don't forget to subscribe. It's free and it will help us keep these incredible interviews coming your way. Here are 2 other episodes you may enjoy. I'm Delphine. Welcome to my circle.